everyone, welcome to the third episode of Poetry Salad and NMJ. Today we have with us Aswin Vijay, and he is a noted poet and a teacher. He'll introduce post-colonial poetry to us. Welcome Ashwin to Poetry Salad.
Hello Nithya, thank you for inviting me on to Poetry Salad and for these questions. First, I will respond to the question about the homogenizing attitude of the West that post-colonial poetry is responding to. Yes, I do think there is this homogenizing tendency. Also, historically, post-colonial poetry has been post-colonial writing has been in response to the Western way of thought, the colonizers' way of thought, which is largely based on the Judeo-Christian thought, deriving from a binary view of the world. As we see in most of classical literature, when we read and when we understand literature and history, what we see is this sort of a binary thinking, good versus evil, as well as the self versus other, and Christian versus pagan. This sort of a binary view of the world is predominantly Western, and post colonial writing challenges that sort of a binary view. What we tend to see these days is that academia has been largely influenced by this post colonial tendency to see things in a spectrum. This is quite evident in fields like environmental or eco criticism, or gender studies, and even in areas of social justice. This is something that we need to realize is a direct influence of post-colonial writing and is very evident in post-colonial poetry as well. There are various themes and concerns that have evolved in post-colonial poetry over time. I would like to draw your attention to just three of them. First, being post-colonial poetry's relationship with language and an exploration of language's relationship with history and power imbalances. A poet, post-colonial poet, in whose work we can see this quite evidently at play is Derek Walcott. Even Indian poets like Arvind Krishna Mehrotra or A.K. Ramanjan, Dom Moraes, all of these poets also display this kind of tendency to unpack language and see the sort of power relation that is encoded into language. You might remember Nizam Ezekiel's very Indian poems, which are also an exploration of language and power in so many ways. So you this is one. Another thing is the attempt at shifting perspectives on established narratives. For example, retelling of established stories like fairy tales and myths, in order to shift the perspective and to see the world from the point of view of characters that are traditionally marginalized. This is also a post-colonial tendency of post-colonial writing, especially in post-colonial poetry. A lot of post-colonial poets respond to colonial poets and colonial canon and try to rewrite themselves into this canon. There is also the exploration of the self in relation to the world, which is quite different in post-colonial poetry from that of in more traditionally English verses, because how the post-colonial subject sees themselves in the world is quite different from the traditional Western male subject's point of view. And this is also this sort of an exploration of self in the world is also evident in post-colonial poetry. I hope this is a starting point, because there are many themes and concerns that you will see, but these are some of the more universal ones that you will be able to identify when you read through post-colonial poetry. I do not think that regional language poetry in India is anyway reduced or minimized by the influence of English language, but this is because there is a thriving culture of regional language poetry in many regional languages in India, which has grown being influenced by English and other global literary movements and tendencies, while also influencing English language writing in their own turn. So, what they lack is not vibrance, what they lack is not writers. They also have a very vast, dedicated readership. Regional language poetry has more readership in India than in English. Indian poetry in English. So that is something remarkable. And what regional language poetry lacks is probably a global audience. And this, even for the best of regional language poets, global audience is absent, and it is a lack of translation that is causing this sort of a disparity. And more translations can definitely help regional language poetry in this way, because it will reach a wider audience, and also more avenues for publication and circulation. And translation is definitely something that can bridge the gap between various literatures and cultures.